There are moments in life when the noise finally fades and what's left feels unbearable. Moments when the world stops asking for your attention and silence steps forward like a mirror. Most of us run from it. We fill the quiet with work, with ambition, with distractions, anything but ourselves. But silence is not empty. It is heavy with truth. This is a story about a man who believed strength meant never stopping, never slowing down, never letting go, until life took everything that kept him busy and left him alone with the one thing he feared most: stillness. This story will show you why healing begins when we stop fighting the quiet, and how purpose is sometimes found not by chasing more, but by finally standing still. In a small, overlooked town, there lived a man named Elias. Elias had learned early how to stay busy. In the small town where streets emptied by sunset and clocks seemed louder than people, movement was his shield. He woke before dawn, not because he loved mornings, but because they gave him a head start on others, on doubt, on himself. His days were measured in tasks completed, boxes checked, goals pursued. If he kept moving, the quiet couldn't catch him. From the outside, his life looked disciplined, admirable even. He worked hard. He spoke little. He wasted nothing, not time, not energy, not emotion. People described him as focused, reliable, strong, but strength, as Elias understood it, meant control. And control required motion. His home was tidy, almost sterile. No photographs on the walls, no music playing in the background. Even his furniture seemed arranged to avoid lingering. He slept lightly, always ready for the next morning, the next objective. Stillness made him restless. Silence made his chest tighten for reasons he couldn't explain. So he filled every gap. If work ended early, he found something else to do. If the evening grew quiet, he turned on the television, not to watch, but to avoid hearing his own thoughts. If exhaustion whispered that he should rest, he answered with discipline and kept going. Elias believed this was maturity. He believed this was courage. He told himself that slowing down was indulgent. That reflection was for people who had time to waste. Life in his mind was something you pushed through, head down, jaw set, feelings deferred for later, but later never came. Sometimes, in the rare moments when nothing demanded his attention, something uncomfortable stirred beneath the surface. A weight, a question. A sense that he was always arriving somewhere, but never truly present. Those moments never lasted long. Elias was quick to interrupt them. Silence, after all, was dangerous. Silence invited memories. Silence asked questions, and Elias had learned not to answer questions he couldn't control. He didn't think of himself as afraid. Fear was loud, obvious. What he felt was quieter than that, an unease he couldn't name, a sense that if he stopped moving, something inside him might finally speak. So he ran, not with panic, but with precision, not away from failure, but away from stillness. And in doing so, Elias built a life that looked solid, structured, and strong, while quietly avoiding the one place where real strength is formed, within. What he didn't know yet was this: silence is patient. It does not chase you. It waits. And one day, whether by choice or by force, Elias would have to stop long enough to hear it. For a long time, Elias believed he was moving forward. The proof seemed obvious. His days were full. His calendar never empty. Effort flowed into results, and results into quiet admiration from those around him. In a town where many drifted, Elias stood out as someone going somewhere, even if no one knew exactly where that was. He measured progress in visible ways: longer hours, higher expectations, fewer mistakes. Each improvement felt like confirmation that his way of living was right. Discipline became his language, not the gentle kind that listens to limits, but the rigid kind that tightens when life loosens. He woke earlier, worked harder, demanded more of himself than anyone else ever could. When fatigue arrived, he treated it like a flaw. When doubt surfaced, he drowned it in routine. There was a quiet pride in this, not the loud, boastful kind, but something colder, more controlled. Elias didn't need praise. He needed proof. Proof that effort could outpace uncertainty. Proof that if he stayed disciplined enough, life would reward him with certainty. And for a while, it did. Small victories stacked neatly on top of one another. Tasks completed. Responsibilities increased. People relied on him. They trusted him. They said things like, "You're always so steady," or "I don't know how you do it." Elias smiled politely when they said that. He never told them the truth. He didn't feel steady. He felt held together by motion, by structure, by the belief that stopping would undo everything he had built. Success, he learned, could be just as effective a distraction as failure. The busier he became, the less space there was for reflection, the less room for silence to slip in uninvited. And that felt like relief. Nights passed faster. Weeks blurred together. Time, once something he feared wasting, became something he barely noticed at all. Yet beneath the sense of progress, something subtle began to shift. Moments that should have felt satisfying felt strangely hollow. Achievements landed without weight. Rest felt uncomfortable, almost undeserved. Elias noticed that when things went well, he didn't feel joy, only pressure to maintain momentum, to keep up, to not lose ground. His discipline, once a tool, had quietly become an identity. And identities are fragile things when built on movement alone. There were evenings when he sat alone, surrounded by evidence of effort, and felt an unnameable absence, a sense that life was passing by somewhere just outside his awareness. He brushed those thoughts aside quickly. Reflection, he reminded himself, was inefficient. Still, the thought lingered longer each time. What if progress wasn't the same as purpose? What if movement wasn't the same as meaning? Elias didn't ask those questions out loud. He answered them the only way he knew how, by doing more, pushing harder, running faster. But illusions, no matter how convincing, cannot hold forever. And somewhere ahead, unseen and unannounced, waited a moment that would bring everything to a stop. The collapse did not arrive with warning. There was no dramatic buildup, no clear sign that the ground beneath Elias was weakening. One moment his life moved forward with familiar rhythm, and the next, something essential gave way. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to change everything. It began with a single failure. A decision he had made with confidence unraveled in ways he hadn't anticipated. The outcome wasn't just disappointing, it was irreversible. What he had invested time, trust, and identity into slipped beyond repair. Explanations were offered, circumstances were blamed, but none of it restored what was lost. For the first time in a long while, effort did not equal results. Elias tried to respond the way he always had, by working harder, tightening control, doubling down on discipline. But this time, the familiar tools failed him. No amount of structure could undo what had already happened. No amount of focus could bring back what was gone. The loss spread quietly through his life. Plans were canceled, responsibilities shifted. People who once relied on him no longer needed his steadiness. Some drifted away without cruelty, others without explanation. The silence they left behind felt heavier than any confrontation ever could. Elias told himself this was temporary, a setback, a test, but deep down, something else stirred, something colder and more unsettling. A question he had avoided for years now stood directly in front of him. Who am I when I can't keep moving forward? Without his usual momentum, days stretched uncomfortably long. Mornings arrived without urgency. Evenings came without relief. The routines that once gave him purpose now felt mechanical, stripped of meaning. And in the quiet that followed the collapse, something unexpected happened. The noise faded. Not just the external noise of obligations and expectations, but the internal noise of constant striving. For the first time, Elias had no clear direction to run toward, no immediate problem to solve, no proof of progress to chase. Silence stepped in where motion once lived. It was not peaceful, it was confrontational. Memories surfaced uninvited. Regrets, old emotions he had labeled unnecessary and buried under years of productivity. He felt them now, not sharply, but persistently. Like a dull ache he could no longer ignore. The loss had cracked something open. Elias realized then that his discipline had protected him from chaos, but it had also shielded him from himself. And now, without that shield, he felt exposed, unprepared, human. Failure, he learned, does not just take things away. It reveals what remains. And what remained for Elias was a life suddenly quieter than he knew how to handle. He stood in the aftermath of collapse, unsure of his next move, staring into a silence he had spent years outrunning. For the first time, stillness was not a choice. It was all that was left. Elias refused to believe that this was where the story ended. Failure in his mind was something you corrected, not something you accepted, so he did what he had always done when life became uncomfortable. He resisted. He clung to the familiar even as it slipped further from his grasp. He rebuilt his routines with obsessive precision, woke at the same early hour, moved through the same motions, forced structure onto days that no longer asked for it. From the outside, it might have looked like resilience. Inside, it was desperation disguised as discipline. Elias replayed the past endlessly, examining every decision for where things had gone wrong. If he could just understand it, if he could just pinpoint the moment of failure, perhaps he could reverse it. Perhaps he could return to the version of himself who knew where he was going. But time does not move backward, and neither does truth. The more he tried to recreate the old rhythm, the louder the silence became. Without the weight of real purpose, his routines felt hollow, like echoes of a life that no longer existed. The effort exhausted him, but rest felt worse. When he stopped moving, the quiet pressed in. It asked questions he didn't want to answer. Why did you need to be busy all the time? What were you avoiding? Who are you without achievement? Elias responded the only way he knew how, by pushing those questions down. He filled his evenings with noise again. Screens, background sounds, anything to drown out the stillness. He told himself he just needed time, that eventually things would feel normal again. But denial is not healing. It is delay. The past tightened its grip. Elias found himself living more in memory than in the present. He measured each day against what used to be, not what was. Every reminder of loss felt like a personal failure. Every quiet moment felt like judgment. Guilt settled in slowly. Not guilt for the collapse itself, but for not preventing it, for not seeing it sooner, for believing discipline alone could protect him from loss. Elias blamed himself in ways no one else ever did. And yet, he never allowed himself to feel that blame fully. He stayed busy enough to keep it blurred. Stillness terrified him because stillness demanded honesty. And honesty threatened the identity he had spent years constructing. So Elias fought the quiet. He treated silence like an opponent to defeat rather than a message to hear. He believed that if he resisted long enough, the discomfort would fade, that the ache would dull, that the questions would lose interest and leave him alone. But silence does not retreat. It waits. And the harder Elias fought it, the more exhausted he became, until one day, without realizing it, he had no strength left to resist. That was when the quiet finally caught up to him. There comes a point when resistance runs out. For Elias, it arrived quietly, without drama, without collapse, without even a clear moment to mark it. One morning, he simply didn't get up right away. The alarm rang as it always had, but this time he let it continue. Not out of rebellion, not out of rest, but because he felt no reason to move. The room was still. Not the peaceful kind of stillness people write about, but a heavy, airless quiet that pressed against his chest. The kind that makes time feel slower and thoughts feel louder. Elias lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar and unsettling. Emptiness. The routines had lost their power. The noise no longer distracted him. Even his efforts to avoid silence felt exhausting. It was as if every path he had used to escape himself had closed at once. Days passed in a muted blur. Elias spoke less, ate without appetite, moved through the world like someone observing life from behind glass. He wasn't overwhelmed by emotion. He was drained of it. Sadness would have felt like relief. At least sadness has shape. This had none. Isolation crept in, not because he pushed others away, but because he no longer knew how to meet them. Conversations felt distant, smiles felt borrowed. People sensed the shift even if they couldn't name it. And Elias, once defined by reliability, now felt like a presence without weight. In the quiet of his evenings, he sat alone, hands resting uselessly in his lap. There was nothing to plan, nothing to fix, nothing to outrun. The silence he had feared for so long now surrounded him completely. And for the first time, he didn't fight it. Not because he accepted it, but because he had nothing left to give. Emptiness has a way of stripping life down to its barest truth. Without motion, without identity, without purpose, Elias confronted a version of himself he had never allowed to exist. A man without answers, without certainty, without control. It frightened him, but beneath the fear something else stirred. A quiet honesty. In the absence of noise, he began to notice how tired he truly was. Not physically, but emotionally. Tired of proving. Tired of running. Tired of pretending that strength meant silence in the wrong places and effort in all the wrong directions. This was the lowest point. Not because something terrible happened, but because nothing happened at all. No progress, no distraction, no escape. Just Elias and the truth of his own emptiness. And yet, emptiness is not the end. It is the space where something new can begin, if we allow ourselves to stay long enough to listen. Elias did not know it yet, but this quiet moment, this hollow pause, was the doorway to change. The encounter did not feel important at first. There was no dramatic setting, no moment of clarity framed by music or light. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, in a place Elias had passed countless times without noticing. A small bench near the edge of town, a stretch of road that led nowhere in particular. Elias sat there out of habit more than intention. Walking had become his only remaining routine, not to arrive anywhere, but to let the hours pass. The day was calm, the air unmoving. Silence settled easily around him. That was when he noticed the old man. He sat a short distance away, feeding small birds from the palm of his hand. He moved slowly, patiently, as if time had agreed to follow his pace. The birds came and went without fear. Elias watched without thinking, drawn to the stillness of the scene. After a while, the man spoke, not looking at Elias, not expecting an answer. "You don't look lost," he said. "You look tired." The words landed gently, but they struck something deep. Elias had grown used to being unseen, to carrying his exhaustion quietly. He nodded once, unsure why honesty felt easier in the presence of a stranger. They sat together without conversation for several minutes. The old man continued feeding the birds. Elias listened to the sound of wings, to the soft rhythm of breath. For once, silence did not feel like pressure. Eventually, Elias asked the question that had followed him for weeks. "What do you do," he said, "when everything stops?" The old man smiled, not with amusement but recognition. "You stop with it," he replied. Elias frowned slightly. The answer felt too simple, too incomplete. "I spent most of my life running," the man continued, as if reading Elias's thoughts. "Thought if I kept moving, I wouldn't feel the weight of things I never healed." He let the birds finish the food in his hand before standing slowly. "But stillness has a way of finding you," he said. "When it does, it isn't there to punish you. It's there to introduce you to yourself." The man brushed crumbs from his palm and looked at Elias fully now. Silence only feels heavy when we carry things we refuse to put down. There was no instruction in his voice, no urgency, just truth, offered without demand. Elias didn't know how long they sat there after that. The man eventually nodded once, as if the conversation had reached its natural end, and walked away down the road, unhurried, unburdened. Left alone, Elias remained on the bench. The words echoed, not loudly, but persistently. Put things down. For years, Elias had believed strength meant holding everything together, carrying more, enduring longer. But what if strength also meant knowing when to release? The silence around him felt different now. Not empty, not threatening, just open. And for the first time since everything had collapsed, Elias did not feel the urge to run. Elias did not change all at once. There was no sudden clarity, no moment where everything made sense. What he carried home from that quiet encounter was not motivation, but permission. The permission to stop forcing himself forward. So he began with something unfamiliar. He stayed. When the evenings grew quiet, he resisted the instinct to fill them. No television humming in the background, no tasks invented to occupy his hands. He sat with the stillness even when it felt uncomfortable, even when it revealed thoughts he had long avoided. At first, the silence was restless. His mind reached for movement the way a body reaches for balance after a stumble. Old habits surfaced, urges to plan, to fix, to improve. Elias noticed them without acting. That alone felt like discipline of a different kind. This new discipline required patience. Instead of demanding progress, he allowed himself time. Time to feel the weight of what he had lost. Time to grieve the version of himself he could no longer return to. Time to admit that exhaustion had been speaking to him for years, and he had ignored it. Letting go did not mean forgetting. It meant loosening his grip. Elias began to recognize how tightly he had held on to expectations of success, of identity, of control. He had carried them like armor, believing they protected him. In truth, they had kept him from healing. Each day he practiced release in small ways. He stopped replaying old decisions, stopped measuring himself against who he used to be, stopped rushing the quiet. The silence slowly softened. In its place, something gentler appeared, a sense of presence. Elias noticed the way light moved across the room in the afternoon, the sound of his own breathing when he slowed down, the relief of not needing to be anywhere else. Peace did not arrive suddenly. It grew, and with it, a new understanding of strength emerged. Strength was not constant motion. It was the courage to remain still when everything inside you wanted to run. There were moments when the old discomfort returned, when the quiet felt heavy again. But now, Elias did not treat it as an enemy. He listened. Often, it carried simple messages: rest, honesty, patience. Healing, he learned, is not loud. It does not announce itself with breakthroughs or victories. It shows up quietly in the spaces where resistance used to live. Elias had not fixed his life. He had not regained what was lost, but he had found something he had never possessed before: a relationship with stillness that did not feel like surrender. It felt like trust. And that trust, fragile as it was, marked the beginning of rebirth. Growth rarely moves in a straight line. Just when Elias began to feel grounded in stillness, the old impulses returned. Quiet at first, then insistent. Familiar thoughts whispered that he was falling behind, that peace was a pause, not a destination, that if he stayed too long in this calm, he might lose something important. Old habits do not disappear. They wait. Opportunities arose, offers that promised motion, recognition, and the return of a faster pace. People noticed his absence from the noise and invited him back into it. The invitations were not unkind. They were tempting because they felt familiar. For a moment, Elias wavered. The idea of momentum stirred something restless inside him. Discipline, as he had once known it, called him back. The urge to prove, to himself most of all, that he was still capable, still strong. But something had changed. Before, Elias would have said yes without hesitation. Movement had been his refuge. Now he paused. He listened, not to fear, but to his body, his breath, the quiet understanding forming within him. He realized that the struggle had shifted. This was no longer about surviving loss. It was about choosing consistency over escape. Elias tested himself in smaller ways. He noticed how quickly he wanted to fill silence after a long day, how easily he reached for old patterns when discomfort surfaced. Each time he gently returned to stillness. Not perfectly, not always successfully, but intentionally. Discipline, he discovered, could be compassionate. It was no longer about control. It was about care. Some days were harder than others. On difficult evenings, the quiet felt heavier again. Doubt crept in. Progress felt invisible. There were no external markers to reassure him that he was moving forward. That was the test. To continue without applause. To trust growth he could not measure. To remain present even when nothing exciting happened. Elias learned to sit with uncertainty without trying to resolve it. He learned that peace was not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to meet it without panic. Old habits lost their power not because he defeated them, but because he stopped obeying them. Strength revealed itself slowly, in moments no one else saw, in the decision to rest instead of push, in the choice to listen instead of react, in the patience to let healing unfold at its own pace. The silence no longer threatened to swallow him. It held him. And in that holding, Elias found something steady. Not the rigid steadiness of his past, but a living, breathing resilience built on trust rather than force. The change in Elias's life was subtle. There were no announcements, no visible markers of transformation. If someone had asked him what had changed, he might have struggled to explain it in words, but he felt it in the way his days unfolded. Calmer, lighter, no longer urgent. He still woke early, but not to outrun the day. He still worked, but without attaching his worth to output. He still moved through life with intention, but now, intention came from alignment, not pressure. For the first time, Elias felt present. Moments no longer slipped past him unnoticed. He felt the weight of a cup in his hands, the rhythm of his steps on quiet streets, the ease of breathing when nothing demanded his attention. Silence, once something to endure, had become a companion. And with that companionship came purpose. Not the kind that announces itself loudly or seeks recognition, but a quiet sense of rightness. Elias no longer asked where he was going next. He focused on where he was now. Meaning emerged naturally from care, from attention, from honesty. People noticed a difference, though few could name it. "You seem lighter," someone said once. "You're different," said another. Elias smiled, not because he felt changed, but because he felt whole. He no longer needed to explain himself. He no longer needed validation to confirm his path. Peace, he discovered, does not ask to be seen. It simply exists, steady and sufficient. The silence around him felt full, not with answers, but with acceptance. Elias understood now that stillness had not taken anything from him. It had given him back his life, piece by piece. The parts he had overlooked while chasing motion, the parts that could only be heard when everything else fell quiet. He had stopped running, and in doing so, he had arrived. There were challenges still, uncertainties that came with living honestly, but they no longer frightened him. He trusted his ability to meet them without losing himself. Transformation, Elias learned, is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before you learned to run from yourself. In the quiet of his days, Elias found strength that did not require effort, purpose that did not demand sacrifice, and peace that did not depend on approval. It was enough. There will come a moment in your life when the noise fades, not because you planned it, but because life in its quiet wisdom removes what once kept you distracted. In that moment, silence will feel unfamiliar, heavy, maybe even frightening, and your first instinct will be to run. This story exists to remind you that you don't have to. Elias's journey was never about losing everything. It was about discovering what remained when everything unnecessary fell away. Like him, Many of us mistake motion for meaning. We believe discipline must always hurt, that strength means enduring without listening, that purpose is something we chase rather than something we align with. But silence teaches differently. It shows us that healing begins when we stop resisting our own presence, that letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. That failure is not the opposite of strength, but the doorway to a deeper kind of resilience. Silence teaches patience. Not the patience that waits for reward, but the patience that allows life to unfold without force. It teaches courage, the courage to sit with uncertainty, to face the parts of ourselves we've kept busy avoiding, to stay when everything inside us urges escape. It teaches discipline, not as control, but as care, the daily choice to listen, to rest, to remain honest even when progress feels invisible. It teaches self-worth, not as something earned through achievement, but as something inherent, present even in stillness, even in failure. And most of all, silence teaches purpose, not as a destination, but as a way of being, a quiet alignment between who you are and how you live. If you are in a season where things feel empty, know this: emptiness is not the end. It is space, space for healing, space for transformation, space for rebirth. You don't need to rush through it. You don't need to fill it with noise. Stay. Let the quiet speak. Because when you stop running from silence, you may discover what Elias did, that peace was never waiting at the finish line. It was waiting where you already are. If this story resonated with you, carry it gently. Share it with someone who needs permission to slow down. And if you want more stories like this, calm, reflective, and deeply human, stay with us. The journey continues.